the voices screaming genocide around the world are getting louder and louder. And then the counterbalance on the Zionist side is just scream anti-Semitism louder and louder and louder. And I feel like it's reaching this breaking point. I mean, we just saw at Glastonbury over the weekend where the British rappers, got everybody to chant death, death to the IDF. And that's becoming a motto. Everybody's taking that up. And then, of course, you were seeing a big pushback from the Zionist crowd about, playing the victim card and anti-Semitism.
Mm-hmm.
We got Hitler 2.0 all over again is what's being pumped out there. But this has to break, right? Where's this going? How is this going to, how are we going to see this affect not just Israel and Iran, but just everybody?
Yeah.
That's a big picture question. So.
Yeah, well, it is. Again, it's just that in the background, there's always the Samson option, but even short of the Samson option, just the chance that Israel will go nuclear. We're just talking about Iran. And I wouldn't put it past Netanyahu. Maybe the IDF would just say no, but actually the chance that he would actually use nuclear weapons against Iran. And he would base it on, okay, they are, racing breakneck speed to develop a nuclear weapon. We have no choice. We have to use a limited part of our portion of our own arsenal to stop them. Now, that's just, that's madness. But the one country in the world that might do it is Israel. Already, they're hated by all the world. It's not like, they're in danger of losing their reputation because they've already lost it. And they just might go for it. That's another possibility that we have to think, just in general, that, Israel starts to feel itself cornered. Maybe it's not actually in the midst of a war, on the verge of defeat, but it feels that it's being cornered, diplomatically. Maybe there's the beginnings of economic sanctions, and they do believe that, Iran is becoming much more powerful than it was before. And, the other possibilities, they could actually go nuclear.
Well, that would be the end, right, for Israel, right, if they do that?
Well,
it's...
Yeah, I don't know. I just say, the degree to which the Western establishment has supported Israel is something that throughout this genocide, let's remember, is nearly total. I mean, now, I would hope that the use of nuclear weapons would be a bridge too far, but I wouldn't be all that sure. Again, they might still have, I'm almost positive that the U.S. administration, the current one or whatever the next one is, will make excuses for Israel if they do that, and that certain Western governments, not all of them, but certain Western governments would do the same. They say, well, they just had to. It's kind of unfortunate, but again, look what we've seen so far. I mean, it's just like this.
I know, but
the horror in Gaza. You just think that, well, they can't possibly let this happen. Well, maybe they can.
I know, but I mean, just the idea of a country that's not supposed to have nuclear weapons, that's not a signatory to the NPT, doesn't allow inspections, has an illegal nuclear program, uses a nuclear weapon to bomb a country that it was a signatory of these, was under inspections, had a legal civilian nuclear program, and they drop a nuke to stop them from, that's just that's beyond cartoon hypocrisy at that point. It's
but I think we're already beyond cartoon hypocrisy. You saw what happened when they attacked Iran. And the support that they got, well, Israel has to defend itself. Well, wait a second. This was a completely unprovoked attack on Iran.
Yeah, I know. But I mean, a nuke, who knows? Yeah. But you're right.
I'm not expecting, I'm not predicting this, but I'm just saying that these are possibilities that if, again, looking particularly at Netanyahu, but it's just the Israelis in general, they've reached this point where they understand that the great majority of the world really hates them, and they don't care. They've actually kind of chosen to go down that road. It's just like what can we do to make them hate us more? We just don't care.
Yeah, I mean, it's because whenever we talk about Israel, it comes down to that. Israel's out of options, and when it runs out of options, then the nuclear option almost feels like the only one available. And that's what's so scary.
Right.
But is there any, can we maybe put a positive spin on things? Is there any way that this can end well? Could we actually get out of this mess? Like,
Yeah. Well,
can there be
yeah,
a
well,
change? Can Israel
yeah.
accept that, okay, we can't take down Iran. We have to sort of accept our place here in the Middle East. We have to have defined borders. We can't constantly be attacking our neighbors. We have to give Palestine a state.
Well, I think there's at least hope when it comes to Iran. They might just accept that they can't do it, and refuse to do anything so reckless, as the scenarios that I just painted. I think that's a possibility. Maybe the Iran war is over. That's a possibility. I'm not predicting that, but that's a possibility.
You're still there.
But as far as Gaza and the Palestinians go, I just don't see any hope. I'm just sorry to say that. I think that again, the forces within Israel that are really committed to ethnic cleansing are so powerful. Let's remember, not too long ago, we had that poll conducted by UPenn that showed, what was it, 82% of all Israelis are in favor of ethnically cleansing Gaza. I mean, that is the consensus of Jewish Israelis, I should say, but that's 80% of the population. That's the reality in Israel. And so even if Netanyahu is locked up, whoever takes his place is going to continue with ethnic cleansing. Now, possibly he'll slow it down or something, but he'll continue with it. And let's not forget that even, it's so easy to forget because of the horrors of Gaza and the madness of the war against Iran. We just forget about the West Bank, but terrible things are happening there. And we probably would be talking about the West Bank if it wasn't for these other horrors. I'll just give you one example. There's a village that I remember visiting. I don't know if you visited it. It was the last remaining Christian village within the West Bank, called Taybeh, actually, Taybeh. And it's I remember meeting with, there's a kind of a representative of the village. It's a Greek Orthodox woman who married a Palestinian Orthodox man and moved and, has raised a family there in that little village. And I remember seeing, it was still an intact, Christian village, but you could see up on the ridges around, there were these new settlements, and they just looked like castles of, the built fortifications built by the enemy army. And that's just, in a way, that's what they were. And so they were hanging in there, and occasionally there were attacks by settlers on the outskirts of the village, but the village was intact. Now, I just saw just a few days ago that parts of the village were burning. The settlers had gone in. They were setting fire to cars and attacking people and ransacking houses, that kind of thing. And that's just a very small incident, but it's representative of what's happening throughout the West Bank. And so and these people, the fact is, again, there are a lot of people within Israel that think that, Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, and a lot of, let's say, Zionists outside of Israel that don't like them. They think they're kind of crazy, giving Israel a bad name. But this is, the IDF. The IDF actually has carried out all these atrocities in Gaza and supports all the settler actions within the West Bank. This is the mainstream IDF that is responsible for these things.
Yeah, I really wish Christian Zionists in America could hear these stories. I don't think they understand what they're supporting. Well,
yeah, I hope not. I hope they don't understand.
Well, I mean,
I think most of them don't. I think that's correct.
Yeah. So you think that, maybe there's a small chance that maybe that Israel won't try something with Iran. It'll continue its ethnic cleansing campaign of the Palestinians, both West Bank and Gaza. But won't that? I feel like I said earlier, that the voices screaming genocide are becoming so loud that in itself, even if Iran doesn't start back up, won't that incite something? I mean, it's amazing it hasn't so far. It's been 22 months.
Yeah.
But surely at some point, right? Isn't it going to be?
Yeah, well, you would certainly hope so. That's all I can say. But I think what it might do is just minor adjustments, kind of, efforts to just obfuscate, what the Israelis are doing, or into some way, appear to create the appearance that they are responding to, these criticisms, because that's what's happened already. Remember, like the outcries about the enforced starvation in Gaza started to get louder and louder in places like Europe. And eventually they responded, but they responded with this really diabolical, relief plan using the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. And we've talked about how, the poor people, these starving people come to get a box of let's say beans and flour or whatever it is that they get, and are gunned down in the process. And it's happened day after day after day. So, it's like they just changed the form of the genocide rather than the reality of it. That's how they responded to the criticism. It's like, okay, yeah, we're receiving this. We need to do something somewhat different. We're starting to feel some heat here, but we still have our ethnic cleansing campaign. Actually, we could use this GHF, to actually support our ethnic cleansing campaign. And I think it's clear that that's what they're doing. And I think that you'll see other things like that in the future. There's really no substantive change of policy, but it's sort of just a way of temporarily pulling the wool over the eyes of, their critics. It gives them something to say. They say, we've just gone out of our way to try to feed these people and whatever. Of course, it's utter nonsense. What they're providing is a small fraction of what they need, and they're providing it in a way that actually has, led to more atrocities. But they have, for a while, they're able to stave off their critics. Those people that really are ardent Zionists, but started to feel themselves, rather uncomfortable because of what was going on. They didn't have answers to the very pointed criticisms that were directed at Israel. Now they have this line, well, Israel has gone out of its way to try to, to feed these poor people or whatever. And that'll work with some people for a while. But it doesn't change the reality. And then I think, in the end, it won't prevent the rising tide of criticism. But it's just sort of like, I don't know exactly how this is going to turn out. At some point, there may really be a change of policy in a place like Europe. Some of those supporters, so far it's just been rhetoric. But if it does go beyond that, then Israel is in a tough place. We'll see what they do. Maybe they will really have to meaningfully slow things down, or actually, stop the campaign for a while. But right now they seem to be hell bent on it. And there are people like within the ruling coalition that just don't give a damn, that they really don't.
Do you think it's actually possible that Israel could achieve a complete ethnic cleansing of Gaza? I mean, and the West Bank? I mean, it just doesn't seem like they could. I mean, look how damaged Israel is after 21 months of Gaza. And what have they achieved? They have killed lots of women, lots of children, destroyed lots of buildings, made life miserable for people. But they haven't really, it's been a strategic defeat, right? I mean, they have not defeated Hamas. They don't control Gaza. They are hated beyond imagine across the world now. It's just, this hasn't gone on well. I mean, this is where we're at 2 years. I mean, the rate we're going, it's going to be 5 more years of this in Gaza, of just constant horror and anger building up around the world. It's just not possible. And then they want to do the same in the West Bank. It's like, you actually think they could do this?
Well, it's hard to see. I think they can achieve a partial ethnic cleansing of Gaza. For example, maybe they could do it for North Gaza, and I know that has been a stated objective of at least a part of the Israeli elite. And that when you look at the actions that they're taking, like where they're locating the very limited number of distribution centers, they tend to be in the south. And I think the idea is to starve the Gazans out of the north, and to actually seize permanent control of the north. Now, the problem with getting all of Gaza is that, well, you either kill them all, or cause the deaths of virtually all the Gazans that are still there, whether through starvation or disease or, again, direct violence. And that, again, maybe even our completely amoral Western leaders just might not be able to stomach that. There might finally be a break, a real collapse of support for Israel if they could start to, clearly are on that path. It looks like they really are just trying to kill them all off. I don't think that's going to happen. But then the alternative, if you really want to totally ethnically cleanse Gaza, is that you have to send them somewhere else. And so far, there isn't a government in the world that has agreed to that. Clearly there have been efforts made by both the U.S. and Israel, to find places that will take the Gazans, but we don't see that happening. So what we may end up with, in the not so distant future, is just that, okay, the Gazans, who are already quite crowded, just being pushed into southern Gaza, and in just tremendous misery, but just barely staying alive, and northern Gaza just becomes a permanent part of Israel. I don't know. That's just such an awful picture, but I don't know. I can't really see anything else.
Well, I mean, I feel like if it continues much longer, we're going to see, maybe something happen in Jordan or in Egypt. Maybe Hezbollah begins to reconstitute itself. I don't think that they can do it. I mean, it's just so many people are watching it. The cries are getting it's going to destroy all the politicians throughout the West. All of their careers will be destroyed because of their support for Israel, unless they start standing on the right side of history. I just don't see this. I don't see them. I'm amazed they've gone this far. But the damage I think done to Israel has been irreparable, just reputational damage, economic damage. I just don't think that they can get away with it. I don't think they'll be able to do it. Hopefully they can realize that, like, hey, if we want to have any chance of existing as a state, we need to stop now and start making amends as quickly as possible to try to be a normal country. But it's just not possible. That's just so out of
it's just not in their thinking at all. You only find some dissidents on the fringes that are talking like that. But it's just the way that every Israeli is thinking is that, okay, well, first of all, they hate us because we're Jews. It's just anti-Semitism. We're used to this. And the only way to deal with the Arabs or with the Muslims is is through terror. And you simply have to come, you have to hit them so hard, you have to be so merciless in your approach to them that they understand that there is no hope, and that there's no reason to ever raise their heads again and, attempt to strike back. It's through the only way to deal with our enemies is through brute military force. It was actually, that philosophy, if you want to call it, was actually first put forward before the creation of the State of Israel by a Zionist by the name of Jabotinsky. And he wrote a book called The Wall of Iron. And that was essentially, Israel has to create a wall of iron, and it is about just completely crushing the Arabs. And that has become, the policy, but more than the policy, it's just like the very deeply rooted thinking of the great majority of Jewish Israelis. So, if you have people that think this way, the only solution to every problem is just more military force, then, we see where we are, and it's only going to get worse.